Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into my channel. This is Zack. Coming to you again, bringing you some videos, some content. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave me a comment, hit my Cash App, and let's go. Keep me motivated to come back here and give you some good content talking to you. So what I'm trying to do now is finish up my life story. What I want to do is kind of start off where I left off, which was talking about me executing what I thought was a brilliant plan. What it was is I came up with this plan in jail where I could become the perpetrator and the victim in a crime, be able to steal a lot of money, make a lot of money, spend it on what I want to, buy me some property, rent it out, and retire, and never have to work again. That was my goal. And I thought of a way to execute that plan. I put that together step by step, started executing it, and found out that there are certain things that I wasn't prepared to deal with. And that's what I want to cover today. So just to keep you posted on what the plan was to use the identities of people serving life sentences to open up bank accounts so that I could put my money in the account, take my money out of the account, and tell the bank that someone stole my money so they would use the FDIC to give it back. I felt like if I did this on a consistent basis, like if it was $5,000 or $10,000, and I got 3 accounts for each identity. At 5,000, I make 15,000, or at 10,000, I make 30,000. I felt like if I did about 100 identities, making at least 15,000 on 100, then that's $1.5 million, which would have been enough money for me to retire, buy up some property, and just live my life out with my wife, who had become pregnant while we were executing this plan. And keep in mind, while we were doing this type of hustle made us so much money, it appeared as if we were wealthy anyway. Because her and I did it a couple of times, very successful, and we had a lot of money. So when we're walking around dealing with a lot of criminals and you got a lot of money, you get a lot of respect and people want to hang out and help you out, do whatever they can. So my idea to implement the plan was to find other criminals. And sometimes like I said, I would go to court and meet some people or find out about other criminals through first appearance, contact them, get them out of jail, and then put them to work. Now, this was working good. You know, it was an excellent plan and it would get me so much. But in the end, I really didn't know the people who I was dealing with. So it yielded me probably like 3 people that actually pulled off trips for me. A couple of times people would just, when I rented them a car, the way I illegally rented cars, they would take the car and leave. Or I would ask them to fly somewhere, they'd miss the flight, and I wouldn't deal with them. But it did lead me to a couple of people who successfully pulled this off. One of the people I did want to say is I was killed, he was murdered. Now, it's important that I explain the whole situation so that you understand. And I feel responsible for that because I kind of prepped someone who wasn't in a good place in their life and gave them a lot of money that they weren't prepared to handle, and they mishandled that money that led to their murder. So to kind of explain what's going on, when I started dealing with a lot of other criminals that I had met in jail or that I met from first appearance, I told myself at that point in time, I need to put a buffer between them. I need to hire someone that can answer their calls and put their calls through to me. And that person was a secretary, basically. And that person ended up being a girl. Her name was JoJo. Jocinta was her name, but we called her JoJo. JoJo was the mother of 4 kids. She was what President Clinton would affectionately call a welfare queen. She got over $1,000 in food stamps. She was on housing. Like she lived decently through government funding. And so she was home all the time. And so she made the perfect secretary. So I would pay her like $2,000 a month to basically answer calls. So I gave her a phone. So you answer calls through the phone I gave you. She would answer calls, field questions when she could field questions. And if it was important enough to talk to me, she would tell them, hold on, I'll call him and ask him. So she'd call me up and say, hey, such and such wants to know, blah, blah, blah. And I say, do this and this. JoJo also was proficient to where I would have her either set up and make their hotel reservations, which I paid for illegally. And she would make sure they got to the airport on time, or she would use a card that I set up to order their airline tickets. So she became like the travel agent secretary. But most importantly, she became the buffer between them and me. So they would call her, talk to her, ask her questions, and it only got to me when it became relevant enough where I needed to have my attention paid. So the way the whole situation was working out is once I gave you the plan, I generally insisted that you find a friend or a girlfriend that I would fly you to another part of the country where you would take the identity of someone doing life, 2 identities really, 2 for each of you, and you would go and get a driver's license in each identity's name. You would take the birth certificate and all the other paperwork that I put together. You'd go to the DMV, come out with a license in that person's name. Once you came out with the license, you would then go and open up a P.O. box, which wasn't really a P.O. box, like a mailbox, et cetera, or a UPS store. You'd get a box. It kind of gets funny because later on we actually just started renting apartments because it became easier. But you would get a box. Once you opened up the box, you would go to the bank, open up a bank account, have the bank send the debit card to the P.O. box. All right. And after you opened up like 3 accounts for each identity, so that was 6 accounts per person, you guys would leave. 12 debit cards would go to that post office box. So you would fly back to Atlanta where we were living. Once I got all 12 cards, I made arrangements to deposit the money in the account. This was all direct deposits through a corporate account I had. I would make arrangements to deposit money in the account. Then I would steal the money, and then I would either fly you back and you would tell those people that it was not you that took that money, and then the bank would replace that money. Once I did that through all 12 accounts at $5,000, I'd make $60,000 where I would pay the person 10. That was the plan. Actually, my wife and I had done that plan about 3 times with great success. So I had a couple of people that I had met through first appearance that executed the plan, no problem. Now, this one gentleman, I believe his name was Daryl, he got out and I sent him and a friend to, I don't remember what it was. I think it was something in Maryland. They opened up the 12 accounts. So when they got back, I was only running $5,000 through each account. So when they got back in town, I gave them the $10,000. Normally how I would pay them is I would give them one of the little prepaid MasterCards, and I would just transfer money from a corporate account I had onto their MasterCard. I could do that and it would be there the next morning. Well, the reason I remember Daryl is he didn't want to be paid like that. He didn't want to have limited access to the money because he wanted cash. As a matter of fact, I remember him because when he agreed to go, he said when he gets back, he wanted cash. And I was kind of like, well, I don't know, man. I mean, I'll go to the bank and pull up. And he's like, look, that's the only way I'm going to do it if I get cash. So I agreed. And when he got back, I gave him $10,000 in cash. Matter of fact, he wanted all hundreds. So I went and made a withdrawal from my bank, gave him the $10,000 in cash. And he went off. And so when I was calling him back, because I had talked to them about making another trip and making another $10,000. So they're like, give us 2 weeks and we'll go back. Normally I would wait, give you guys like a week or 2 off. And this was all part of my dream of having like 5 people traveling at all time, opening accounts and flipping it around, because I had a ton of identities. I had a bunch. I had reached out to people in prisons using the Second Chance Act passed by George Bush, telling them that they had an opportunity to get some type of computation of their life sentence if they filled out the form. So they would fill out the form, give me all the information I need to obtain their identity, and then I would obtain their identity and use it. So I felt like I had unlimited amount. Once I sent that flyer off, I had over 150 different identities that I could possibly get the birth certificate for. So when I ordered them and they were coming in consistently, I was just setting up a file folder with that identity in it, and I would get that file folder to the worker. So I definitely could see a 5-person crew, us working about 6 months, my wife and I having close to $2.5 million and completely getting out of the game. That's my vision, and that's what I was working on. So when I gave Daryl his 10 grand, in my mind, I'm like, listen, in 2 weeks, come back and make you another 10 grand. He's like, oh, most definitely. Well, I had never heard from him. And I remember one day, the secretary, JoJo, called me up and told me that, hey, you know, I just got a call from the police and Daryl is dead. I said, what? She goes, yeah, Daryl's dead. She goes, he was beaten to death. And it turned out to be like 2 days after I gave him the money. What had happened was when they identified him, he didn't have any family that they could contact. So a detective, about a week and a half after his death, actually went through his phone and was calling some of the people on his phone. And he was telling us that some of the people didn't even agree that they knew him. So when he asked JoJo, she's like, yeah, I know him. He's like, well, do you know his family or how to get a hold of his family? Which was kind of weird because I did know how to get a hold of his family. And because when he called me from jail, I actually would give him a call to his family members. For those that have been in jail or know, that's called a 3-way. So when he called me, I'd actually do 3-way calls for him. So I was able to put the officer in touch with part of his family. But the officer said they found him beaten to death in an alley, which is horrible. So I felt responsible for that because obviously he had a drug addiction, and I felt like giving him 10 grand in cash like he asked caused him to probably flash his money to his dealer, and maybe his dealer beat him to death for the money. I mean, I just feel like I'm responsible because had he been broke, I don't think that type of situation would have happened to him. So I feel bad about that. As a matter of fact, I kind of know that offering what I offered to people who have been in jail or people who have drug habits ended up being too much or more than they can actually handle. Give you an example. Whenever you would go on a trip for us, if I'm flying you to another state, obviously I have to buy your airline ticket, which is no big deal. Obviously, through all of the rental car fraud that I was capable of doing, when you landed, I could get you a rental car. So you would land and you would go straight to a rental car, which would be the same year type of vehicle. So whatever year we were operating in, 2005, 2006, it would be a 2005 or 2006 vehicle. Most of the time they wanted Cadillacs because that was the big thing. That's when the new Cadillacs came out, or they wanted to Escalade. And seeing how I was making what I was gonna make, and most of the time I didn't pay for the car, I would give you exactly what you wanted. So I would fly them to a different city, put them in a Cadillac. Then I would use stolen or paid for stolen credit card information to book you a room in whatever fancy hotel you wanted, and I'd cover all room service and movies, so you could get whatever you want. So I'm taking someone that's strung out on drugs that was just in jail, flying them to, if they were willing to go, flying them to a different city, giving them a late model car, and sending them off to a very expensive hotel where they can order any food they want to. I never thought about what they might have been thinking in their head. Like, what the hell is going on? Like 3 days ago, I was broke in jail, and now I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Hard Rock Cafe Hotel, and I can order anything I want from room service. Driving a late model or this year's model of Cadillac car. Like, yeah, I'm going to get me some crack. The exhilaration being in the room is too much. So they all started doing drugs. Because initially, my plan was, as I mentioned, 5 teams doing this over and over again, me making $60,000 or $120,000 for about 4 months, me making $120,000 5 times, which is about $500,000 for about 4 to 5 months, and then retiring on that money, paying them 10 grand, 15 grand per person, and ended up retiring on that money. That was my goal. Didn't even come close to happening because the situation deteriorated rapidly. Let me give you an example. So they would fly out. I could think of a team. Shane and Andrew is no exemption, even though Shane and Andrea total managed to do 10 trips. Because I used to keep a tally, I remember this. They managed to pull off 10 trips successfully. So they were our best team. But they had their problems. And I'm going to get into them in just a bit. So initially, somebody might start off. What started happening is we had one gentleman that, the gentleman Michael from jail, on his second trip, what happened was he called me from whatever city. I think I sent him to Boston. He called me from Boston and said that the rental car got stolen. I said, what? He said, the rental car got stolen. I said, okay, do you still have the key? He's like, no. I'm like, so where's the key? He said, well, I left the key in the car. So I'm like, you left the key in a late model car? I'm like, did you call the police? He's like, no, I don't want to call the police. It just was stolen. Really what he wanted me to rent him another car. So I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. Of course, he called through JoJo, and JoJo's telling me, but JoJo's putting him on a 3-way call to me. And I'm like, I don't think I want to rent another car when this one's stolen and you haven't called the police. Now, if you call the police, then I will rent you another car. But I'm not going to rent you another car when this was stolen and you don't even know where it's at. You left the keys in it. So then at that point, he pursued to curse me out. And I'm like, okay, you're fired. I don't care what you do from this point on. When the room lapses, it lapses. You can touch your flight back if you want. That's fine. I don't care. You're fired. You're out of here. You don't get to threaten and curse me out over a mistake that you made. He was gone. Now, when he didn't work out, the reason I brought that up is it started dawning on me that I've been in jail a lot. And when I was in jail, I met a lot of people. And because I did some counseling or people talked to me, I knew their government names, and I had an affinity for a lot of people, so I knew their first and last name because I used to promise to keep in touch. So by going through my mind, I would write down each person's first and last. Okay, this guy went to prison. I would look them up, and if they were in prison or in jail, I would help their situation. Or if I could track them down, I would ask them if they wanted to come work for me, all of which are mistakes. Because as I mentioned, a lot of people in jail, even though they're in jail for other crimes like theft or even violence or domestic violence, generally the reason for them committing those crimes, they have a drug problem. And I found that out the hard way. So that was one example of the rental car being missing is one. And of course, I've had the rental car is wrecked, or they turned the car in and people would call me up and say, hey, we're going to charge you for the damage to this car. I'm like, what damage? They're like, man, the whole side is crushed in, and he just takes the car back in. So then, of course, when I ask the person, they deny it. They say that the people that call me are lying, which is crazy. It went from the rental car to people actually being on a trip and getting arrested. I met 3 girls in a grocery store once that were in line to get a Western Union. I think I was sending a Western Union. Either or, I was going to the store to send a Western Union, and there were 3 girls that came up and asked the woman if the Western Union had come in yet. Like, I was standing there and they're like, oh, excuse us a second. I said, no problem. And they're like, I'm just wondering if the Western Union had come in yet. So the woman checked and see, and she goes, oh yeah, it's here. So, okay. So they're like, well, he was in line first. I said, no, it's no problem. Go ahead and get your Western Union. I figured it was an emergency and it's money they needed. It's 3 girls. When I found out the Western Union that they were waiting on was only $15. I'm like, you're actually anticipating and anxiously waiting a $15 Western Union? It's like, okay, you must be broke. And in my mind, that means that maybe you'd want to do something to make some money. Now, by far, I want to say this story. This is, because I'm going to give you a couple other stories. This one to me, by far, is the worst. This is the worst example of hiring somebody that you could ever come up with. So when I figured that out, I asked them, I said, ladies, I said, if you give me a minute and let me talk to you, I'll give you $50. I just want to talk to you. They're like, what? I said, if you give me a minute, let me talk to you, I'll give you $50. So I sent my Western Union and we talked outside, like leaning on my car, we were talking. We started talking and it went well, so we actually went to a restaurant and talked. Basically, I propositioned them to go on a trip. Really, I wanted them to just drive. We were in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia area, and I wanted them to just drive up to like Greenville, South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, open up, there was 3 of them, so I'm thinking that's 9 accounts. So I want you to open up 9 accounts. I'm gonna give you all an identity, one identity to first start off, and then after that I do 2, which would be 18 accounts, which like, don't even get me started on the math, how much I can make. So I said, I'm gonna give you all an identity. I explained it to them, and they're like, hell yeah, let's do it. You know, and they explained they had nowhere to stay, so we booked them a hotel room. I actually, the next morning, I picked them up, and I actually went and picked them up a rental car the next day and gave them a rental car. They're absolutely in shock because I gave them a little money to start off. They're down, so they make the trip to Columbia, South Carolina, which is great. So they went there, they actually checked into the hotel. I'm excited, they have all the paperwork, the birth certificate and all. They're gonna go to the DMV and get a driver's license. I'm like, this is all gonna go well. So once they checked into the hotel, I get a call from JoJo at about 4 in the morning. Of course, JoJo's mad. She's like, hey, I got these dumb bitches on the phone that you just hired, and they're hysterical, and they're demanding to talk to you. They don't even want to tell me what's going on. I'm like, what? This is 4 in the morning. She's like, listen, they've called me about 6 times. You need to talk to them because I'm not going to keep taking the call. So I said, okay, fine, JoJo, put them through. So she puts them through and they're hysterical. So I'm like, whoa, English, slow down. English, please. Tell me what happened. So when they were able to talk, she's like, somebody came here and beat me and one of the other girls up, took the car and left in the hotel. So I'm like, whoa, wait. Some guy came to the hotel room and beat you up. I'm like, how did they get in the hotel room? They're like, okay, well, we let them in. There was a couple of guys we met. We let them in, they came over. They ended up beating my ass, but they've taken the car. And the hotel is telling us to come get our stuff and get out. So I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You've only been there 5 or 6 hours. How the hell is all this happening? Like, I don't know. Just you need to do something because he beat up such and such. As that's what it was. One of the other girls had went to jail. One was in jail. One was beat up. The other one and the car was gone. Like at that point in time, I told him, listen, here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna give me about 20 minutes, right? And you're gonna call me back. I'm gonna arrange for you to get another car and I'm gonna set you up a different hotel room and I'm gonna get you guys situated. Just calm down. Well, you need to blah, blah, blah. I said, yes, I'll also send you some money. I'm gonna send you about $300, all right? And get you another car and another hotel. Just give me 20 minutes and call me back, all right? Okay, no problem, blah, blah, blah. All right, no problem, call me back. So when they hung up, I think JoJo hung up too. I ended up calling JoJo back. And I said, I'm changing their phone number, JoJo. If by chance, so I turned their phone off. I said, if by chance they call you, right, just don't answer or put them to voicemail. Don't even talk to them anymore. I abandoned them. I'm like, that is absolutely ridiculous that I've just spent over $1,000 on you ladies. And in less than 6 hours, the whole thing went to shambles. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's called, for me, putting people in situations they're not accustomed to. To get to the Shane and Andra story. So Shane and Andra started off fantastic. As a matter of fact, sitting and talking to them, they were making plans on buying a car, renting a house, you know, getting their life together, getting married. They would actually talk to us about those plans. And I was excited because I'm like, this is absolutely going to happen for you. And as a matter of fact, I had even propositioned to us getting to a point where I would actually start, when we do 120, I'd actually start splitting it with them so that they can make their dream come true, just like ours. It's like, do a couple more, and then I'll actually split the money with you. Because I had a fantasy of having 5 teams. So of course I could split with one, especially my best one. But they started slipping. They started slipping to where they would go on a trip, and first they'd go on a trip and get everything done in a day. Like they'd run through, because they normally would take 1 day to get your ID and then another day to open the account. They were so proficient, they could do all of that in 1 day. And I'm talking 6 accounts, which was like, I'm like, how the heck did you do that? So they had gotten proficient, and then all of a sudden they got way less proficient. To one trip that they were there 3 days and they hadn't opened any accounts, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. They had gotten to the point to where they got kicked out of a couple of hotels. And really the deal with that is it was them calling me and telling me that they didn't want to stay in that hotel, that they had a problem or they had a problem with a neighbor. And I would believe it and just switch out the hotel. But once they were in a hotel and the hotel manager called me. Well, he called JoJo, but JoJo put him through to me. And the hotel manager said, yes, may I please speak with whatever fake name you gave me at the time? I go, yeah, this is whatever fake name I gave you at the time. He goes, as I understand it, your company, you have a couple of employees that are staying here with me at the hotel. I'm like, yes. He goes, okay. He goes, it's generally not my place to advise you of, or to make this type of statement to someone. And he goes, they haven't done anything where like I can prove so I can make them leave. But he goes, I believe that your employees have a drug problem. I'm like, what? He goes, I think the employees you have staying here are having a drug problem. I said, well, why would you say that? He said, because the female has been walking around in the lobby. I've had a couple of guests complain topless and aimless. The male was passed out outside of the door and she drug him back in. I've had a couple people complain that people have been here that they think we're delivering drugs. He's like, the situation is going. And of course he told me that once they left that I was no longer welcome to book any rooms at that hotel. But he did want to advise me that he thinks that the employees I had have a drug problem. So when I hung up the phone from him, I called them up, and the entire call, they were absolutely incredulous. Like, why would somebody call and tell you why would I walk around with no shirt on? Like, that's an absolute lie. I don't know why that guy would say that. And I'm telling them, I don't know why he would say that. You know, obviously he's extra concerned because he actually looked up my company and called me to tell me that this is what the situation is. So that was just part of the problem. Naturally, at one point, they lost a rental car, it got lost, and where they were in a high-speed chase with the police, where they dumped the rental car and they told me they needed one in emergency. It just became a catastrophe. It all came apart. It actually, this is over the course of about 14 months. It came to a point, and this is what I think is important, because there was a certain amount of money that we had, And if we ever got under like about $60,000 or $50,000, then my wife and I would go out and do it ourselves and build us back up to over 100. And then I would try to bring on different teams and crews, and we would go back down. It became where the prospect of actually having people working for us, it would just drain the money. Like I wasn't even getting the one good trip like I started off in the beginning. I was actually losing money trying to get people. And I had plenty of advice. I had friends tell me, like, why is it that you keep hiring or wanting to hire criminals from jail to do the job? And I said, because if they can hold it together long enough, I could actually make $110,000. If they could keep themselves together for 3 days, I make $110,000 and pull it off. You know, it's like, well, you know, you could obviously find other people, you can look other people up. And here's what else is kind of funny. Because I've had people refer other people, and I've went to talk to them myself. In the underworld, or in the criminal world, I do not talk like the average black man, and I scare people. One situation we were going to talk to someone about doing some work for us and going. My wife and I were in the car, and it was a friend of hers that introduced us to the guy. So the guy got in the car, right? And I'm saying, okay, listen, this is what we need you to do. We're going to need you to go on a trip, and you're going to open up a couple of accounts for us, right? And he said, hey, can you pull over real quick? So I pull over the car, and he gets out of the car and said, fuck you, man, and slams the door and got out of the car. So I'm looking. And so the friend that introduced us jumps out of the car and runs over, calls my wife out of the car. And then they all go over and they're all talking. And they're talking, they're talking like some kind of real animated and deep, hard conversation. So I'm sitting there like, okay, I don't exactly know what happened. I met this guy 3 minutes, told him he's supposed to want to work with us. I told him what's going on. He says, F me, gets out of the car, and now it's like he's arguing. Like, what the heck could it be going on? So then my wife and the friend come back to the car, and they get in the car, and they say, okay, let's go. I said, what happened to your friend? So my wife looks at me, and she says, baby, he thinks you're the police. He says, no normal black man talks like you talk, so he thinks you're an undercover cop. I'm like, are you kidding me? So it made even taking references impossible. Now, that's not an exclusive event where that happened, where someone assumed that. That happened to me many times. Many times I'm talking to someone, trying to bring them in, and they'll just hang up the phone on me, and I call back and they won't even answer the phone. That was a reoccurring problem. So it became a huge problem to bring people in that would work, that would actually get this done for us so we can make the money we needed to retire, raise our kid, because my wife was pregnant at the time, and get out of the business. We had to do it ourselves. But then, one of the primary reasons for our federal case enters our life. Her name is Mary. Her name was Mary. Mary was connected to a friend of ours that I knew from Georgia when I was in the county jail. We used to sit and talk. He actually got out and he did do a trip, but he came apart. He did one trip and he opened half of the accounts. He only got 3 open, and he came apart. I remember he went to Arizona and he came apart. I have a lot of stories of those people that just did not work out. It's unbelievable. So when he went back to jail, I got to tell this story because it is kind of funny. So the story of him, he made a half a trip. I made a little money. I paid him. And this was New Year's Eve. He was in Florida. That's what it was. His first trip didn't go well. He only got half of the accounts open. He got a little sidetrack, or his plane leaving back, and he wanted to come back immediately. So he flew back, and he was prepping for his second trip. We sent him to Florida. He was in a rush to do it. I told him to wait till after the holidays. It was around New Year's Eve. And so he's like, no, let's get down there. And whatever days the banks are open, like around New Year's, those are the days I'll go into the bank. I got you. So he was in Florida, like Orlando, Florida, for the New Year's Eve holiday. So he called me up one day and he tells me, I'm going to come up to Georgia to party for the New Year's. And I'm like, you're going to drive 8 hours to party for the New Year's when you're in Orlando, where you could go to any party that's going on down there? Why would you do that? He's like, because I know people in Georgia. That's where I want to be for New Year's Eve. So I said, well, I think that's ridiculous, bro. I go, because he wanted me to get him a hotel room. Right. I think I did agree to get him a hotel room because I'd known him from jail. So I agreed to his stupidity, booked him a hotel room up in Georgia, in the Atlanta area where we were, 8 hours from where he was in Orlando. And he ended up making the trip and got pulled over, and they had drugs in the car, and he went to jail. He was out on parole. So obviously when he went to jail, he wasn't getting out. So at some point while he was out or moving around, he told a girl named Mary about us and the things we were doing. And Mary called us and told us that we need a person like her on the team. She called JoJo, and JoJo one day called me up and said, hey, I got this girl, Mary, that's been calling me up. And she goes, I think you need to talk to her. I said, you think I need to talk to her? I go, why? What is she saying? She goes, I think you need to talk to her. She goes, she's a little sassy. I think you're going to like her, but I think you need to talk to her. I said, okay, fine. Put her through next time she calls. So the next time she calls, I get on the phone and I'm like, hello? She goes, hey, I'm just calling to let you know that you need me. I said, what? She said, and I called the friend of mine that got arrested for the profiles. I called him Polar Bear. She said, Polar Bear told me all of what you got going on, and you need me. That's all I'm going to tell you. You need me. You need to bring me on the team. I said, well, how do you know that I need you? She goes, do me a favor, look at my resume and tell me what you think. I said, okay. She goes, go to GeorgiaDepartmentOfCorrections.com, pull up my resume. Here's my phone number. When you're impressed with what I have, call me up and then I'm going to come by and see you. But you need me. Impressive. So then I get online, look up at the Georgia Department of Corrections, see her criminal history, which was kind of similar to mine and is long, of fraud and fraud-related things. I'm like, oh, perfect. Plus, she was an attractive lady. She was like, I think she was from Hawaii. She was like part Hawaii, part black. She was very attractive. So I said, yes, we're going to bring her on board. So naturally, I called her back and asked her to come in, which was the spider talking to the fly. I'm the fly. So I invited her right into my parlor for my death trip, which ended me up in federal prison. I'm going to save that story for my next podcast, so you have to stay in touch. So do me a favor. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't hit like, and leave me a comment and let me know what you think. And hit my Cash App if you have an opportunity. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys shortly.